from now on is recorded. I got to be cautious. Welcome SA53. So this is what we're going to do, right? So all these things are set. So now it is time that we go into the installation and see how the installation happens. So as I mentioned, what you need to do is you have to go to the Spring IO, and then in the projects there is this Spring Tools 4. Okay? So when you come here, you can see depending on your operating system, you're going to get a jar file. Okay? So when you click on this, it gets downloaded. Okay? So let me just put it in a folder so that I can show you how it works. I've created a folder called SA53 for all of my demos. So probably I'll create another folder here. I call this as installers. I'm going to use this to show you how the installation happens. I click on this and then I save it. Okay? So that's to sort of take the file. See, I have a LAN connection at my home, and so you can see that sort of faster for you. Depending on your broadband, the download could be a little slow. Okay? So don't worry about it. What I'm trying to say is it's just a jar file. Okay? You can use the Java command to execute that as well, but you need the proper Java to be set up. That's what one of you is asking me. I'll talk about it in a moment. So that's pretty much what you need. Okay, so it's a self-extracting file. In case the extraction is not working, there are a few things that you have to check. One, you check if Java is in your command line. Okay? If it is not there, it is very likely that your self-extracting jar file is not working. How do you check that? You press the command prompt button, or easier way is to have the PowerShell like I have. Okay? So you can type in PowerShell and then get the PowerShell. Okay? So here you can say run as administrator, whichever is easier. Okay? So for now I'm just using a command prompt, and then I'm saying Java version. Okay? So immediately it should show me a Java version. And if it runs on the command prompt, if Java runs on the command prompt, your self-extracting exe should also work. If your self-extracting exe is not working, that is because Java is not inside your path. So that is something that we can correct. Okay? How do I correct? The first thing I should know is I should know how many JDKs I have at the moment. Okay? How do I know how many JDKs are there? I'm always a keyboard person. Some of you like mouse. I'm the Linux generation, so I always use commands for everything. So when I need to check my application list, the command that I use is appvis.cpr. And when I do that, you can see that the programs and features comes like this. Okay? So here I can check how many Java versions I'm currently running. So I go here, I look at it, EJ, right? How many JDKs do I have? Which a box? Okay. I'm running only 11, and I'm okay with that because that's the recent JDK. So some of you might have multiple. That is where the conflict starts. Your Java won't work, or when you say Java, it picks 17 instead of 11. I have a habit, guys. Call it bad or pessimistic. I always run only one version, so I know exactly what is happening. So I have a habit of just running only one at a time, but it's up to you, lah. You can have multiple, but please make sure that the Java is pointed to the right version. How do you know which version is the Java pointed to? You got to go back to, say, for example, let me open this E drive SA53. So this is your PC, right? This is your Windows Explorer, right? You select your PC and go to properties, and inside there in the system properties you have environment variables. So here you can check the path variable. So usually it should be either in the user path variable or very likely in your system path variable. So you have to see how many Javas are there in the path. Okay? If there are multiple Java in the path, I recommend just having only one. Okay? So in my case, I only have the standard Java, the programming files standard. I can even remove this. Okay? So I will remove this because it is not installed. These are stale paths, so I could remove it. And those are the ones that you got to check. Okay? So if you put that inside the path, then you're fine. Okay? So if you know that something is wrong in the path, just go and verify there are too many duplicates, remove that and just have only one JDK if necessary. So that's one thing that you can do to resolve if your self-extracting exe is not working. Most of the time it works. So you can see that if you have a self-extracting exe like this, if you double click it, it extracts into a folder. So if it doesn't work, then you got to go and look at all these nitty-gritties. See if you have multiple Java, make sure you're pointing to just one. All these self-checks can be done. If not, you can see that the self-extracting exe goes through and it creates an Eclipse environment for you. Exactly like your Eclipse installer, not anything difficult or tricky. But the JDK settings can be tricky. That's why I'm talking so much. Now, if there is something wrong, sometimes what happens is in your case, you see what happens is you should have a proper licensing group. See, I'm using Windows Education license. All of you are entitled to get a Windows license in NUS. If you don't have a proper legal version, you can ask the NUS Computer Center folks. They'll give you a license key you can install. So as NUS students, you are entitled to have a Windows 10 education. This is good, but some of you have just got laptop on sale and all that, and you have Windows 10 home. In such a case, you might have firewall and other issues. So check that. If that is the case, take the pain to upgrade it to Windows 10 education. If you feel so confused, ask somebody for help, installation help. So that's something that you got to be careful about. So it all goes down to the basic operating system that you're using. So that's something that you got to understand. Now, if this is fine, I still have issues. I need to run the jar file, but for some reason the Spring Tool Suite is not working. So this is the official guide. So always check for the official guide. So I'm pasting that so that you can take a look at it as well. So if you think that you have your command prompt, Java version works, but still the self-extracting exe is not working, in such a case, you can use this command. You can just say Java, point to the jar file, and then point to the bin jar file and the full path of the Java, and then the full path of the zip file. Then that should extract. Can we zoom the screen a bit, probably to display settings here? I know that. I like to have my, sometimes, yeah, I will increase the font size, Bhuvesh. I understand what you're talking about. So maybe here, see, I'm not just talking about one piece of the window, right? So it keeps moving. So don't worry, when I start my coding, I put my font size to minimum 16, so you won't be in trouble once you start seeing the screen. So yeah. So that should answer many of your questions. So when you have done the installation, I think I can still go to the display and also try. I don't like to bring it down because it looks blur. I'll go with this for now. Later I can increase the font size. So I think that should solve the problem with this. Okay, so so that's pretty much what I want to talk about. So let me close this trials. Okay, so these are the things. You can just say point out to the Java version which is installed. Generally, all your Java installation will go and sit inside your C program files and inside the Java. This is where you will find all the official Java installation. So in case you have multiple versions and all that, all your management should be done via this. So in case you don't know how to self-extract, the self-extracting exe is not working, figure out what JDK you have, figure out the binary folder of it, and then the Java command is just there. So you have to put the full command here, C:/program files blah 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 /java/bin/java.exe space, then the full path of the Spring file .java. That's all is the command. Nothing, don't worry, just uninstall, that's it. I'm not going into the next step. You're okay. Yeah, so far you're okay. So this is to help people troubleshoot if you had issues. So now, assuming that you did everything right, like Teresa asks, let's move on. If you have SA53 and in the installers you have created a subfolder called SA 12, right? One dot release, right? So if you open this, you will have very similar to Eclipse installation folder. What you can do is you can right click and create a shortcut for it. That's my habit. Up to you. You can create a shortcut and then you can send it to your desktop. Okay? So you can call this whatever name you rename this to, SA53 Surya, whatever you want to give for this, you can give this, and then you can push it to desktop like I've done here. Okay? So when you want to start this IDE, you either double click on the main or you can double click on the shortcut. That will start the installer. So let's see what happens when you start it. So let me start from the desktop shortcut that I've created here. So I click that. So you can see the first thing it asks you is for a folder workspace. This is very similar to Eclipse. You have already done that in Eclipse, right? It's the same. Just go into I've allocated place. I'm going to choose workspace. So this is where I'm going to do all my coding initially. So I'm just going to put my workspace as launch, and immediately you can see that it creates a .metadata folder. So this it does even in Eclipse. What it remembers inside this folder is just all your user actions. Okay? So in case your workspace is corrupted or something, just come here, delete this .metadata folder and restart your tool. It should be fine. In case your installer is corrupted, don't worry about anything. Just delete this folder and extract the self-extracting jar again. You can recreate it. Okay. So something went wrong, the views are not okay, something went bad. You don't have to be very frustrated. At any time you want to you find something is wrong and you can't work with it, there's a jam, it keeps on running or something bad is happening, you can come back and recreate the Eclipse. You can also come back and delete this metadata folder and restart your workspace. This metadata folder will remember all your actions. So this is the memory, okay? Past actions of yours. So if you clear this, then it can start fresh again. The same way, if the installer is corrupted, you can just restart it by the self-extracting. So these are plan Bs whenever you get into issues. Okay? So if you have an understanding of how the machine works, it's always easy to deal with the machine, right? So I'm just trying to tell you how these things work. The same philosophy as Eclipse. It's nothing different. And the editor is also very same like your Eclipse. So you got your different perspectives here. You have your Explorer here. You have your boot dashboard here. If you start a fresh workspace, you won't have any projects yet. Okay? So this is exactly what you are expected to see. So once you have self-extracted your exe, just double click it and see that if you are able to see the windows. But understand that I can't wait for everyone to finish. I'll be just moving on. In case you can't catch up, you go back and see the videos and then catch up from there. So for now, my recommendation is you can try in parallel, no harm, but don't hold me back. Okay, so that's all I'm asking. So this is basically your IDE. Okay? Why I am so particular about using this IDE is starting a project in Spring is quite easy when you use this IDE. Okay? Why is it so? Because it comes with all the inbuilt facilities to get the components, so it gets the components on the fly. That's one of the reasons we are using it. How does it get the component on the fly? So I'll talk about all the theory behind. So maybe I will just show you the tool that it uses. It uses a tool called Maven. So this Maven is nothing but a simple build tool that Java programs use to manage its libraries. So if you want to use Spring, there are certain kind of libraries that has to be managed, right? So all the libraries that are needed are basically fetched from this project. This project has a way to catalog every open source project that is happening in the world, and any Java program can Java project that needs to use these libraries can use this tool to automatically get the latest version. Because version control is a big thing in the open source world. Versions keep upgrading and there is no point in hard coding your libraries. Okay? So that's why we are going to use this tool internally. So we will also vividly see what this tool is doing, and all these things come inbuilt. All the Maven and the Spring tools come inbuilt inside the STS. So that is why I'm using this. So hope Teresa, you're okay now. So that's basically what I'm trying to do here. Now I'm going to start teaching you about certain settings, because there's a question regarding if I have 11 as well as 17, what should I do, right? See, you have to understand that Eclipse as well as STS, so whatever I'm teaching is common to Eclipse as well as STS, has got this menu called Windows, and then there is a menu item called Preferences. In this particular screen, whatever you're using is global settings. Okay? When you set something here, this applies to the whole tool. The same way, when you select a project and right click and choose the properties, that is local settings. Okay? So always the global settings will take the first level of settings, but you can sort of override it by using individual project settings. This is how Eclipse works. So if you have two JDKs, what happens is in your preferences, if you come into the Java menu and if you come into the installed JREs, you can see that the default installation points to 17. Okay, so this is the basic 17 JRE that comes inside the Spring tool that you have installed. So this is the default version that comes in. So it uses the basic JVM. So that is why it points to 17. My recommendation is remove that, okay, so that you don't have version confusion, and add the JDK 11. So how do you do that? Just say add standard virtual machine and then point to the directory. So as I said, C, program files, Java is the place where you will find these things. Just select the JDK 11 and then say finish. So that becomes your default. Okay. So this way you're always forcing whatever projects you are doing to stick to 11. Okay. Why so? Because some, as I said, the cloud components are not that stable. So that's one of the reasons we are sticking to 11 on the first 2 rounds. Third round you will change it. We can have fun changing it and trying out. But for now you just have it. So this is the global settings. So anything that you want to use will now use compliance level 11. You can't use anything higher than that. 16 and 17 is not supported. So it's warning me. I'm okay with that. So I'm just going to say apply and close. Okay. So if you have multiple JDKs and you want to manage them, you go into Window, Preferences, install JREs. You install all the versions that you want and only select the one that you want to make it as default as check mark. My recommendation is just keep one to avoid confusion. Later on you can play with it, but for starters just keep it one. Now you have to understand there are two things, JDK and JRE. Which one should I choose? Always choose the JDK, because JRE is for execution. It is runtime. JDK is for developers. We need more libraries. Why? We need to troubleshoot, we need to debug, we need to do performance engineering, we need to profile, we need to scale. So we need additional tools, runtime tools. RTJAR, and that is why as a software engineer my habit is always picking JDKs, either OpenJDK or Oracle JDK. I don't care, I always pick the JDK, not the JRE. So I would reckon that you also have that practice. Actually saves you time. So if you go to JDK download, so now we are looking at JDK 11, right? So just say JDK 11 download. If you simply say Java 11 download, it will show you both JVM as well as JDK. Yeah. So when you say Java 11 downloads here, you can see that it basically gives you development kit as well as JRE. Okay. You can choose anything. But I am sticking to software development kit and I am choosing the latest Windows operating system and I am choosing the installer. Okay. So again, I get an installer, it's easy to do. So I have done that. And I sort of stuck to the latest version. Okay, so that's pretty much what I have done here. Okay. So I think I went with the 17.2 if I'm not wrong. I think I'll stick on with that. Okay, so that's to clarify if you have multiple JREs. So any other questions that you want me to clarify? So now I have to attend to Bhuvish who talks about font size. So let me make sure that whatever we code here is visible. So I'll make the editor bigger. I'll try the display settings in the lunchtime again, but for now I'll just manage with the editor because sometimes Zoom as well as my recorder is running, so it flickers a lot. So let's see what's the default font size. 10 is too small, so I'll make it 21 so that you can see what we are coding. Okay, good. So that's pretty much it. So any other queries, any other questions? Are we good so far? Silence. Okay. So can I assume? Yeah, thanks. Okay. So basically we have this. And there is something that I want you to understand. What I experienced in the last 10 days trying to play with this tool is sometimes it's unstable. Okay. Sometimes it completely becomes unstable, so I have to close this and restart my machine. So this, you may also come across it. So just be patient, just close and restart it. Though they claim it to be, I always take stable release. Though they claim it to be stable release, this is the first time. I've never had this issue in the past. Sometimes, see, when there are major version changes, this is bound to happen. 17 is a major version change. So since October, it's been jittery. Okay, so please be patient and be kind. You may have to restart a few times. So let's get started. I'm going to talk next about the initializer. Okay. So how do I get a project initialized in Spring? We have this component called Spring Initializer. Let me show you. So I will close all the others. We have downloaded Java, so we will stick on to, this is my Zoom meeting calendar and Luminous, so I'll just use this. I won't close it, let the Luminous be running. I'll take a new window because sometimes I may have to parallelly do things. Okay, so now if you go to this Spring IO, which is the official project here, as you can see, we have this projects and tools, right? So this is the tool that I'm going to talk about next. So we have a tool called Spring Initializer. So you can either use this or you can use the STS to manage it. Okay? We use the other tool, which is the Spring Initializer, only when you're using a different ID. Okay? Some of you will like IntelliJ, you're going to use that. So in such a case, you probably have to pick the initializer and then use it to create a jar file and then import your jar file. Or in some case, you are using NetBeans, then you will use this. Otherwise, everything comes inbuilt inside an STS. So what this initializer project is trying to do is it is trying to get you an initial architectural template. Okay. What is the architectural template? You remember, let me take the slides here. So if you remember, when I introduced you to the framework, I said you're going to have different types of, if you remember this part, right? I said that you're going to have different types of applications. And even within this different type of applications, I said we are going to use different set of tools. I said you're going to select some container tool, some database tool, some select search tool. So whatever you have picked up, you are trying to put it into a technical stack called full stack, right? So this basically is being defined. Whatever technology you're going to use, you just select all these things and you define and you put that as dependencies inside your project. So that is exactly what this Spring Initializer is all about. And Spring Initializer is run, or the oiled engine is running based on a framework called Boot. Okay? Boot is nothing but a quick starter. Okay? And you can see that you can even try the snapshot versions. I do recommend avoiding them because snapshot versions basically means there are some bugs that are not solved. So either you can try the older version, which is 2.5.7, up to you. I'm going to stick to 2.6.1. It seems some cool inputs in the controller testing. I want to try to show you that. So I'm just trying to use the latest, just to show off. Nothing great is lost by going by 2.5.7. So we have this thing about being trendy, right? So I'm just taking this table 261. Now Spring Initializer also allows you to choose your automation tool. So as I mentioned, we are going to stick to Maven because Maven is more the industry standard. The new generation tool is Gradle. Okay? So whatever you're trying to do with Maven now, later can be replaced with Gradle. So watch out for this. This is more cool way of doing. Go language uses it, Kotlin uses it. So Gradle will be here to stay. So that's the new deterministic approach for Kubernetes friendly settings. Maven is also acceptable by Kubernetes, but the Kubernetes is moving towards here. So this is something that is going to come in. The same way, Spring supports 3 languages. You can choose whichever language you want. So you're trying to create an architectural template using the Spring Initializer. That is exactly what the Spring Initializer is meant for. You don't have to come and use this. What we are going to do is, we are going to create this inside Eclipse so that it is easy for us. Okay? Only if you don't use this Eclipse tool that we are using in the demo, you need a different approach, and that approach is the Spring Initializer. So now that I'm trying Spring Boot for the first time, I'm going to show you how it works. You see, in the menu you will have a lot of create. So far you are so used to creating a Java project, creating a project. That was the only thing that you have been doing the first 6 days. You create a Java project and then you code it. So you would have created CATS, club application, facility, member class, booking class, exception handling, functional programming, taking inputs, arrays, collection. Everything was using create a Java project. Now we are trying to make them as applications, right? So we need a different wizard. So the wizard that we need to use is the create new Spring starter project. Either you can use it from the icon here, or you can go to file menu and you will see that this is the same thing there. Okay? So inside the new, just says Spring starter project. Okay? So the starter project basically comes from the STS law. That's why I'm asking you to move to STS. Okay? So I'm going to select that. Okay? So you can use it either way. So I'm going to start the Spring starter project. And this page is exactly what I was explaining here. What language I use, what kind of things I do. Okay? So that's exactly the same page, but this is now inside Eclipse, easier for me. Now you got to understand what selections you are doing here, because that matters. Okay? So when I create my first Spring project, I need to understand what kind of inputs I'm giving. So first thing is you have to name your project. So obviously the default that it suggests is demo, and the package structure that it suggests is COM and example. So I'm going to change them, and I'm going to tell you why I'm changing them and what are the reasons. As mentioned, you can see that there's 3 major milestones that Spring depends on. One major upgrade was 11. The recent October upgrade is 17. You can choose to try, but some features may not be there yet. So that's the reason we are falling back to 11 now. And of course, we have moved up from 8 long time ago, so we don't use 8 anymore. So either is fine, but I would suggest first 2 rounds, so let's stick to 11. The same way, when you're selecting your build tool, we'll stick to Maven. We won't go Gradle yet, because Maven seems to be more popular in Singapore as of now, except for some platform companies. Very same, not too big. Now I have to give a name for my application. So I'm going to call this as SA53 welcome. Okay. Or I'll simply say I'll just call my application as welcome. The next thing is I have to decide my package. If you're working for commercial companies, it is the reverse of your DNS. Okay. So if my company is called abc.com, then my group is com.abc. But because we are educational institution and our domain is nus.edu.sg, my habit is to say sg.edu.nus. So this is the normal group that I constantly use. And of course, you are free to change that. Because we are NUS folks now, I'm sticking to NUS URL here. And of course, artifact name is welcome, right? So the full packaging structure is something like this: sg.nus edu.nus.welcome. So this is the main set of packaging that I need. So you can see that this group as well as package is reverse domain name of your group. Okay? Of course, you can be very detailed and meticulous. You can call this as sg.edu.nus.iss to reflect it very precisely. I am lazy, too much to type, so I'm just simply doing this. Okay? So this is the first page settings that you got to do when you create a project for the first time. The next step is to choose your components. Okay? So if you remember my discussion, you see I kept saying that you have to start picking your components, right? Which components you want to use, what components you want for this. So that is exactly this step here. For starters, for iteration 1, we will just use a few packages. I'm going to select them now. So we need the basic web. So when I search for web, you can see it gets me the Spring Web. So I'll select the web. Okay. And then of course I need MySQL. So I will select MySQL. Okay. So I'm going to get the MySQL driver. I want to also demo H2, which is an inbuilt database. So when I select H2, I get the H2 database. Okay. So I would want to demo that. So I'm adding it. Okay. Then of course I want to use a session in a later part. So I'm going to search for session, which is your server-side management. So I'll say Spring Session. Okay, so I'll talk about session, so I'm adding that. So I've spoken about web, I've spoken about web session, I've spoken about 2 databases. So if you have these kind of databases, multiple databases, then you need JPA, which Tin has taught you. So I will add that as well. Okay. And later on I'm going to teach you validation. So I will also add in the validation component. Okay. So let's see, I will try to use my magnifier in case you can't see that. Of course, all the instructions are there, but just in case. So these are the 6 projects that I am using. Okay. Validation, Spring Data, H2 Database, MySQL Server, Spring Web, and Spring Session. Okay. So these are the 6 starters that I'm going to use. So I think I'm okay with that. Okay. So I'm sort of using that for templates. So this creates my iteration 1 set. So that's it. I don't even have to go further. I'll say finish. It creates a work project for me. Now the next thing that I want to test once it gets created is I want to walk you through the structure. Okay. So I want to show you how these things work. So let us use the magnifier again. Sorry about the slowness, but this is how it gets generated. Okay. So you can see that this is basically how the magnifier shows me the work structure. So you can see that this package explorer view is a logical view. It's only going to show you all the logical groupings here. So your the source Java files are going to be here. All the Java files that you create will be inside the Java folder. This is standard Spring structure. All the property files, the web files, the JavaScript, the style sheets, everything will go into the folder called resources. And you can see that the Spring already creates an application.properties file for me. If you double click on that, it'll be empty. You can customize this. So this is your main configuration file. Okay. So this is already there. And just to mirror the main code, you can see that Spring already creates a test class for me. So this is how every component that I create in Spring is testable. So I have a very simple application code that is created. It is a Spring Boot application, and there is a Spring Boot application test code. So these are the 2 default classes that gets created. And the naming style is like this. If I've named my application as welcome, it will call the main file as welcome application. It will call the test file as welcome application test. So these are the ones that gets generated inside. This is all fine. But if you remember, I kept selecting the starters, right? So if you remember, I'll go back to that. If you want to go back to the starters, you can select the project and go to the Spring menu and then say add starters. You can add in more starters. Okay? So we added 6 starters, if you remember. We added database, session, MySQL driver, web, and all these things, right? These were the starters that we used. If I want to add more, I can keep adding more, but I'm not going to add more now. So let me just cancel this. Okay, here is the trouble. I have to close this. Okay. So I can add in more starters now. So depending on whatever starters I have clicked, you can see it has built in all the libraries for me. Okay. Imagine I have to do these things by hand. Horrible, terrible vegetable, I'll never finish it. Okay. It's going to take a lot of time, and that's why we need Maven. Maven is basically helping us behind the screen. Depending on the components that you check, it is trying to do a lot of dependency management. But here is the caveat. Here is the tricky part that you should understand. All of these files are created in a system folder. So let me show you the folder. So if you go to C files, you will have the users folder, and then you will have your name. So in my case, this is Surya. There is a system folder generated called .m2. This is where there is a folder called repository. Here is where it remembers all the jar file. Okay. So something goes wrong or anything, you have a corrupted file, you have a Maven problem or issue, you can always come blindly delete this and come back to your project, okay, and select your project, right click your project, and then go to the Maven menu and say update project. It will once again get it from online. It's an automated tool, as you can see. Okay. So this makes your life easy. So this is all the basics that you got to understand regarding creating a project. We have not created any web component yet. We have not created any data component yet, but this is to just get started. If you want, If you want, you can add those and test. But if you want, what you can do is you can dry run it and see if it starts. Okay? How do you know that? You see, in the local folder, if you expand this, whatever projects you have gets packed into an application here. Okay? So you can see that to run this application, you've got this green button here. You can use that to start your application, or I would always try to be discreet. So I select my project, I right click and say run as, come down and choose the Spring Boot. So long you've been always using Java application, not anymore, right? We are building apps now. Okay? It's not just Java anymore, it's an app which is a runtime. So don't use Java app. From now on, you will be using Spring Boot app. I'm a keyboard, I prefer Alt Shift X. Okay? Alt Shift X B is my comfort zone. But for mouse generation, you can come here and say run it as a Spring Boot app. You will see that immediately it starts the server and it opens up the app. The default port number that it gives is 8080. Okay? So you should see, my console is giving me a warning. I can increase the memory. I'll do it later. I'll show you how to do it. So you can see that it runs in 8080 as default and the whole application has started smoothly. If you have firewall issues, if you have network issues, you won't get to this state. Okay? So in such a case, you may have to put down your firewalls. You may have to set up your security settings to low. All these things, you can test it. Okay? So this is a good checkpoint to see that you have the environment ready to get started with all the components. So now I have some questions. I'm going to attend to them. Are the library files symlinked? Okay, first I got to tell everyone what is symlink. Okay? This person seems to understand Linux. Linux basically uses something called a symbolic link. What it means is your actual file is in only one place and every other place will use a pointer to point to the file. Okay? Yes. So here Maven is symlinked. Okay? Your actual jar files is on only one place, which is this M2 repository folder. This is where the physical files are. Okay? But your projects are just symbolically linking them to the correct files. So the person is right. It is symbolically linked files. Okay? Yes, it is symlinked. So I hope that answers the question. Another one is no other questions. Okay, so that's a comment. Okay. Port 8080 is, I'm going to come to it, don't worry. Just say server.port. Okay, so that's for Bhuvesh and Teresa are the next steppers. Normally when you learn, you get anxious about the next step. So I'm using them as my learning yardstick. So when they ask something, this topic is good to go. So you just say server port is equal to 80, 81, 82, whatever, blah, blah, blah you want, and then restart it. You should be able to do it. So in the application.properties, you can define your ports. So then the default is overridden. Okay? Never do it via, see sometimes you can hard code it. You can select your project, you can come to properties here, and then you can hard code these things on your project facets and project nature and all. My recommendation is don't do that. Do it via property files so that it works anywhere. If possible, always do it in the property files. Of course, there are other techniques that you will find in the web that will teach you using other references. But I'm purposely not using it because I don't want any hard coding. These are considered hard coding. So if you want to change the port number, it should be via configuration files. What is the configuration file? Application.property is the configuration file. What is the name? I should say server.port. And you can give in any number. So then when you select this and then restart it, you will see that it restarts to 8081. So you should be able to change without issues. If you don't have any firewall complaints, it should run like a cake. But if you have any firewall issues, that's a checkpoint. So please stop, seek help from your teammates and make sure you are understanding it. So I've restarted it. You can see the port number is 8081. So that clarifies Bhuvesh's question. Any more questions, folks? Can I stop here and talk about a little bit of concepts? So you are understanding what's happening. So that's all there is to check. Okay, once you are to this stage, you are ready to have your basic components tested. You can put down the server. Now I want you to take a look at the Maven file. See how it is done. Okay? So I think the font size is good enough. I'll put down the magnifier. So this is readable enough. I want you to open the POM file and see for yourself what you're trying to describe in the POM file. So here you're saying I'm going to control the whole project using Spring Boot. Okay? So this is the meta framework. And you can see all your wizard selection gets translated to XML here. Okay? So I've put this as 2.6.1. Okay? And then my packaging, the description, okay? I didn't change the description. If I want, I can change this. Okay? So I can call this as your first or maybe nth Spring app. Okay? So you can give a description to it. The Java version we are sticking to is 11. And then these are the starter projects that we had. So these are the libraries that we need. And I'm going to use Maven to execute this. So all this is basically set up. So because I chose JPA, I can use any JPA library. Because I use validation, you can see that I'm going to validate my mappings later and show you some demos. Because I have a web, I can show you simple web pages. Okay. And I can connect to H2, which is a lightweight internal database. I can also connect to MySQL. Both connectors are available. Okay. And this is all you got to understand as first level of Maven. Okay. And then I'm slowly going to add more libraries and things like that. But I have something for you. Many of you do copy from the web. Okay. When you copy from the web, you want to copy dependencies. Cool, go ahead and do. But don't go and mess up with the parent. Okay? So when you copy your dependencies from some web examples from when you are learning, always try to do a clean way. Include your dependency here. Okay? Sometimes you see the versions are hard-coded. It will have something like, you can say version and then there will be a version x.x.x. That's a very hard-coded way of doing. Don't use it. Instead, remove your version and give a variable name and then put it inside the properties. I'll show you how to do when I do one of my demos. Okay? So don't hard code it, don't blindly copy, never ever override a POM that was first generated. Okay? So this is your mother. In baking we used to say there is this mother that ferments and we don't like to clean it up a lot, right? So please be gentle with your POM file. Your POM file is the heart of your application. There's one of you who is facing an error. It says when the server starts and shut down, the process finishes with error. It says exit code. Okay. So if there is an exit code, see there are a few possibilities. Okay. So when you're trying to start, it gives you an exit code. So you got to trace what message it is giving. Very, very likely it is your firewall, folks. Very, very likely it is your firewall. Exit code 0 basically means it has shut it down because it doesn't have enough administrative rights. Okay? Either the username you're using doesn't have user admin rights, or there is a firewall blocking, or there is a group security policy that is restricting. These are the pointers that you got to check. Okay? So you got to troubleshoot it with these pointers. If not, probably put it into the forum and see if one of us can fix it. Okay? It's usually administrative rights. So in this PC, I am the administrator, so I have all my rights. Okay? And when I'm logging in, I'm not a dumb user, I'm a power user. So I get all the rights. And my networking firewall is default. So none of the ports is being blocked. If I don't have these privileges, if I have my ports blocked, then you can't start your server. So this has to do with security and network issues. Okay? Troubleshoot from that perspective, you should be able to fix it. Great? Okay. So far so good, right? Okay, let's move on. Now I'm going to talk about the whole framework. Okay? So it's time that I put this video. So we will say